everybody, this is Mark Procknik, Librarian at New Bedford Whaling Museum, here with our Stories from the Stack segment. And today's story is one of my favorites. We're going to talk about Edmund Gardner and his story. Now, Edmund Gardner's story, for the sake of today's conversation, begins in 1807. Now, in 1807, Edmund Gardner is shipping aboard the whale ship Union out of Nantucket. He's about 23 years old at the time, and what's interesting about this voyage is this is the very first voyage that he has ever captained in his life. Yes, in 1807 it is Captain Edmund Gardner at 23 years old. So he's pumped up like a rocket. He'd never been in charge of a whaling ship before. This is his first one. He had been whaling. He was a seasoned whaler. But at 23, he's ready to go. Okay? So he begins his personal journal aboard the Union on September 17, 1807. He's having a good time. Everything's very standard. About as standard you can be. Hasn't taken any whales yet, but I just turned one page. Nothing crazy. But then, on October the 1st, 1807, so about a week into the voyage, he writes, "At 10 p.m., we were sailing at the rate of 7 knots when the ship struck on a whale supposed to be a sperm whale. This was on the starboard bow, 10 or 12 feet from the stern and 7 feet from the lower deck. I then got upon the ship's stern and saw the fish spout," he calls the whale a fish, "then ordered the pumps to be rigged, and after pumping some time, confident that the ship had sprung a leak, I then summoned all hands on deck." So what happened here is in the middle of the night, he's sailing along, and a sperm whale smashes into the ship. The ship takes on water, and the ship eventually sinks. Okay? So here he is, 23-year-old Captain Edmund Gardner. The last thing he needs is to be in charge of a sinking ship. But he is. That's just the situation that this sperm whale put him in. So what he does, he writes here calmly. I mean, I would write, if I was writing this about myself, I would write that I calmly did this as well. But how can you not be freaking out? He writes that he calmly ordered his crew into the open whaleboats, and they sailed to the Azores. And then, about a week later, they arrive at the Azores. Nobody died. Everybody survived. So what's interesting about Captain Gardner's journal now, it's not a whaling journal anymore, because he's not on this whaling voyage anymore. Now it's his personal travel journal. And then he writes, on October the 10th, 1807, something that I don't think I ever expected anybody to write about in any kind of a journal in this collection, at least not from a whaler or whaling captain. He writes that while in the Azores, they spoke an American ship from Lisbon that informed them that Bonaparte was marching his forces against Portugal, and that they were making all preparations with the Navy, and that it was thought likely that the Prince would retire to the Brazil for an asylum. So here's Captain Edmund Gardner, who's got a front row seat to Napoleon basically taking over Europe. I never in a million years thought that a story like this was going to be in a journal that was initially designed to be a whaling journal kept by a whaling captain. Never in a million years would I have thought that, but Captain Edmund Gardner writes about it. So, to make a long story short, he hangs out in the Azores for a little bit, catches the steamer back home, and all is done. All is well. That voyage is over. The Union is at the bottom of the sea, but everyone survived. Captain Edmund Gardner's back in Nantucket. He's good to go. He actually ships on another whaling voyage. And then, later on, after that voyage, he ships in command of the Winds, also of Nantucket. And if you thought things couldn't get any worse for Captain Edmund Gardner than having his ship sunk by a whale, you would be mistaken. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what could be worse than getting your ship sunk by a whale? Well, I'm going to read to you what Captain Edmund Gardner wrote on February 22nd, 1816, and I'm going to let you be the judge. He writes, so just a little background here. He's actually out in a whaleboat. They've harpooned the whale. He's about to, take the whale. They're about to take the whale. Okay. He writes, "And at the moment of my delivering my harpoon, the fish, the whale, instantaneously stopped, threw his jaw over my head, threw me backward, and at the time of my recovering myself, found my head was wounded. my left hand much broken. Then taking my knife to cut the line, he wanted to cut the harpoon line to get the heck out of there. Found my right hand had lost its grasp, and the knife dropped from my hand into the sea. I then ordered the line to be cut and to take me immediately on board, which they did, and tended my wounds in the best manner that our situation would admit. So, here's Edmund Gardner. Previously, his ship was sunk by a whale, and now, the whale's looking to finish the job. I doubt it was the same whale. The Union was sunk in the Atlantic. This happened to him in the Pacific, off the coast of Payton, and that's significant, because in his earlier days, before he was captain of the Union, Captain Edmund Gardner was hanging out with other whalers, because they all stopped at the same ports, they all knew each other, they'd all talk. He met this one whaler who said he was badly injured off the coast of Payton, and there was this, I guess, this legendary doctor in Peru who nursed this guy back to health. So Captain Edmund Gardner, he filed it away. He said, if anything ever happens to me, and I'm anywhere near Peru, I'm going to find this legendary doctor, okay? So, this is off the coast of Payton, oddly enough. He orders his men, okay, we're going to Payton, we're going to dock in port. There was a Spanish ship on board, and Captain Edmund Gardner actually writes about this in his memoir, which was republished, actually printed in 1958 into a book. So you can read about his memoir. You can read about this experience of his. He writes that a Spanish ship came on board, the surgeon took one look at him, said, well, his crew said, what can you do for him, Doc? And the guy said, well, I don't like his hand, so we can cut that off. And he said, I don't like his head, because it was in rough shape. And then Captain Edmund Gardner, always the jokester, says, he didn't like my head, but didn't recommend cutting that off. Ha ha ha, it's funny looking back now that you've survived, okay. Then, because they couldn't move him, they said, thank you for your time, Doc, we'll take our chances, okay. Captain Gardner wanted to find that legendary doctor in Peru. So what they did, well, they didn't want to move him. He stayed in his bed, they lowered his bed out of the ship, they attached him to 2 mules, trekked him through the desert, they found this doctor. Okay, the doctor took a look at him and said, okay, I can fix you up, you'll be fine, no problem, but you gotta stay here with me. He said, great, no problem. He told his first mate, go out, do some more whaling, keep checking back in, when I'm all better, I'll meet you, we'll be fine. Great. That's what happened. One day, Captain Gardner woke up, and his hand was in so much pain, he said, Doc, take care, chop it up, relax. I'll take out a bone, it'll be crippled, but you can keep the hand. That's what the doctor did. As you can see in this picture, Captain Gardner survived. He's at a ripe old age here. And you can see the hand that was crippled as a result. But you look at all these, look at him, that's the only visible wound from this whale attack. So this doctor did one heck of a job. One heck of a job. There's a reason he was a legendary doctor. So Captain Gardner meets his ship, the wind's low. They sail back home. Everything's fine. He actually continues to whale after that. Then eventually moves to New Bedford, retires, becomes a merchant mariner, and retires from the business altogether. One of his contemporaries, Samuel Rodman, who was actually the owner of the Winslow at the time, writes later on of Captain Edmund Gardner, probably around this time. He writes in his personal diary, was visited by Captain Gardner today. Was a man full of energy and youth until an encounter with a whale during a whaling voyage. I don't know what that means, but it means he survived. But what really ties this story together for me is the parallel you could draw with Moby-Dick. I'm not saying Captain Gardner's Ahab. I'm not making that claim. All I'm saying is that the ship was sunk by a whale, and a whale basically tried to kill him. I'm not the only one who's drawing that parallel. Melville himself makes that parallel. In the affidavit chapter of Moby-Dick, when Melville was writing about all the different whale ships that were sunk by whales, he writes specifically about the Union. His exact words are, the ship Union, also of Nantucket, was in the year 1807 totally lost off the Azores by a similar onset, a whale striking the ship and sinking it. But the authentic particulars of this catastrophe I have never chanced to encounter, though from the whale hunters I have now and then heard casual allusions to it. Well, if you want to hear the particulars of that catastrophe, look no further than this journal that we have here in the New Bedford Whaling Museum's Research Library. This will tell you all about it through Captain Edmund Gardner's eyes. If you want to read more about his story, we have his journal on the Winslow. I've never been chewed by a whale, but Captain Gardner has, and he'll tell you all about it in graphic detail. Then we also have his memoir, but you can also find it published much more legible. And that's just one story we have from multiple different documents in the collection that ties everything together, even with a nice little Moby-Dick connection. Who knew? Well, I knew, but now you guys know. So, that's the story for today. Hope you enjoyed hearing about Edmund Gardner. Come on down and hear some more.